Hi there. Binah is the third Sephirot on the Kabbalistic tree of life, to which I have attributed the affirmational word of my own devising, Convey. And this is kind of a posh, rather antiquated word for give people the heads up about. But it means express, convey ideas, and I also use it to convey the idea of teaching as well. So you're basically telling people how it is really, and I decided that to convey is a necessary thing. I mean, if you have spiritual information to share, then you're under an obligation to share it in some form or another. Otherwise, you sin, as it says here, and sin it means to miss the mark. You have a mark in life. You have a bullseye to hit, but you don't even bother drawing the bow back to hit the mark, and that's defined. That's what sin is really. So it's a sin to remain silent in the sense of you've got things which you should share with other people, but you choose not to. Or you choose to share with a very small elite of people, under the guise that you have to be a special person for this special information, and you create an elite group of people who are basically into mystery mongering, and they sort of have the secret of life or whatever. Don't like that. The Buddha had an open hand. What you see is what you get. Everything is open and above board. Everything is transparent. So keep silence is sometimes a bad thing. In fact, more to keep silent about things that you should not keep silent about is obviously a bad thing. But we'll come to the thing about silence is also golden in a minute, because you have to distinguish here, I think, in terms of Gnosticism, between imparting the good news of Gnosticism on one hand, and conveying information about your personal gnosis on the other. And here we come to the fact, obviously, silence is golden, because originally the Order of the Golden Dawn, which was heyday in the 1920s, had this thing about the sign of Harpocrates. And Harpocrates was the ancient Egyptian god of silence, supposedly. And you put your forefinger to your lips and say silence is golden, because in fact a personal gnosis is really impossible to convey. And sometimes, of course, silence itself can convey a lot of information as well. Because you're not sort of confirming or denying something, and you really don't know how to put it into words. Your own interior life, your own gnosis, your own sudden awakening or enlightenment. Mostly, it's impossible to actually convey anything at all that makes any sense to anybody. Perhaps not even to yourself, really. And when you start to convey what it is that you experienced on the spiritual level, you find you simply can't do it. You just sort of start saying complete and utter rubbish. But that doesn't matter, because sometimes either silence conveys a lot of information, or even the sort of gobbledygook that you might come out to convey what it is that you experience on the spiritual level, on the transcendental level, could be of use to somebody. I remember my daughter, granddaughter, saying about E. E. Cummings, and most of his writing is like you can't understand what word it says really. But when I gave her E. E. Cummings to read some of the sort of his poetry concrete, she said she got a lot out of it, but she couldn't explain what she got out of it. She just said, "Oh, I understand what E. E. Cummings is saying for sure, really," and she said it very genuinely. I think anyway, And she just seems to have a kind of inner knowledge of what all his strange, symbolistic poetry was on about, which had quite impressed me really at the time. Um, she wasn't just saying it to impress, or perhaps she was, I don't know. Anyway, it seemed to be pretty amazing. And of course, there's no doubt about it that people do express their personal gnosis almost on the subconscious level through the arts. And again, the arts, what you express in painting and sculpture and movie making and such like, is obviously a very personal thing, not exactly autobiographical. Uh, you'll be careful about that if you start saying about writers, oh, it's autobiographical. They can get a bit shirty with you because it isn't autobiographical exactly. So people will express gnosis in some very obscure ways through the arts, and in a subconscious way. I mean, they may not be aware that they have had a Gnostic experience, but they convey lots of things that are in their subconscious, including perhaps a Gnostic experience, an experience of the numinous experience. So obviously, but if you ask them about it, what their art is about, they wouldn't be able to tell you. But and of course, to convey, you have to have a conveyor and a conveyee. And then you have a line of transmission from the conveyor to the conveyee. And I'm not talking about sort of buying houses here. So the information, goes from the conveyor to the conveyee, and often the conveyor doesn't really know what they've conveyed exactly, and the conveyee doesn't know what's been conveyed except on the subconscious level. So a lot of things, can happen that we're not aware of. Basically, a lot of communication can occur that we're not aware of. It depends also on the medium, because obviously the transmission of information depends very much on how it is transmitted, whether it's over the internet or whatever. And this can change the flavour of what is conveyed according to how it's conveyed and over what medium it's conveyed. So things can get a bit complicated, really. So there is a sort of non-localized event generator called the subconscious, which works all this out to its own satisfaction. And you're just sort of wandering around the art gallery, feeling a bit bored or something like that. But your subconscious is having a whale of a time, but you're not aware of it. So, okay, so there's that side of it. But then there is Gnosticism, or Gnosticology, the study of gnosis, the study of the Gnostic scriptures, the Nag Hammadi corpus and things like that, and your understanding of Gnosticism, your understanding of soul-body dualism and of matter-spirit dualism. So that is obviously comes in, and basically you are obliged, as I said, to impart or convey good information of your understanding of Gnosticism, and which has been accumulated over many years. And of course, it's your understanding, but you feel confident enough to convey the essence of Gnosticism to others in a non-egotistical, non-threatening, non-partisan kind of way. And here we come, of course, some people are reluctant to share their ideas because they're frightened that they're going to become sort of megalomaniacs and it's all going to become a big ego trip, which for a lot of people it is, in fact. A lot of ego comes into it, and knowledge is power. Knowledge is about, how great I am, and look at me sort of thing. And then when people challenge your knowledge, you feel challenged personally. And then you get very uppity about that, you see. So a lot of people are reluctant, I think, to teach or reluctant to share ideas or convey because they don't want to get shouted down. They don't want to be called a freak, but they also don't want to become freakish. They don't want to become sort of megalomaniac and they don't want to start a cult. Do you know what I mean? And so you don't want to start a personality cult surrounding Gnosticism, which is always possible to happen, you see. So teaching, of course, is a bit of a difficult thing. I think as the Binah refers in the Golden Dawn sort of the Golden Dawn as an order refers to a grade called Majestae Templi, Majesta Templi, which means Master of the Temple. And the temple can be like the body of knowledge which can be imparted or conveyed, and you're a master of that. So it's all about communication. But Binah is also attributed to Saturn. So communication is fraught with difficulties. And there's a sort of, you can convey ideas, and people sort of say, they don't understand what on earth you're on about, really. So when you're imparting ideas, when you're conveying gnosis, you have to keep it simple, stupid, and less is more. And you also have to start from where the student actually is, or where your students actually are, rather than where you think they should be, which is a very difficult thing to do, because you can get frustrated if you don't think they've understood something which is very, very simple to you. So, keep it simple, stupid, kind of KISS idea, as the acronym has it. Keep it simple, stupid. And simple is good. Simple also means that you know what you're talking about, because you can put it in simple terms for other people to know what you're talking about. And often people use obscurity to mask the fact of their ignorance as well. And then keep a good, we'll come back to that in a minute. Also, the other thing is not just information about dualism, about non-dualism, spirit, matter, body, soul. You have to put that whole cosmology of Gnosticism in a simple way, which is very challenging for me personally, because I seem to be very complex in my thinking. And categorize a lot of things. You also have to clearly present a method. Basically, how did you arrive at gnosis yourself? Because there's Gnosticism, which is the cosmology, the basic philosophical ideas behind Gnosticism, but then there's also gnosis, which arises out of method. So there's a method, perhaps, or a method suggested, or methods suggested for reaching gnosis, from out of which gnosis arises. And that's where we come up to this final thing, which is to set a good example yourself. So you have to be a person who has actually undergone training yourself, become a master of one method, or perhaps several methods, which have proved effective for you. Which you have had experience of, authentic experience of, so that when you teaching people about what they should be doing, or what they could be doing, you've done it yourself. You've been there, worn the T-shirt. Quite a lot of teachers, are just teaching stuff, but they haven't done it themselves. And that's a bit of a problem, I think, really. So you need to have somebody to have practiced all this for many years, a master of the temple. The temple is the method, if you like, and you're a master of the method, and you're teaching your students, practical tips and tricks, how they might attain gnosis, basically. Of course, we have to define what gnosis is and all that kind of stuff. Gnosis in connection with dualism and body-mind dualism, etc. But you also have to give people something that they can actually do, and an encouragement to do it as well. So there's what do I do in order to go into beingness, in order perhaps for gnosis to arise in my life. And then what do I do with gnosis when I've had it or got it or attained it or experienced it? So people are quite practical, really. Most students, people are practical. They want to, like gnosis could be how to make a chair. It's on the same degree. How can I don't know, how can I grow asparagus? How can I make a chair? How can I attain gnosis? I mean, obviously these are different things on different levels. And obviously spiritual exercises are not the same as carpentry. Although Jesus was a carpenter or trained as a carpenter, and Paul was trained as a tent maker. And yet they were, talking about spiritual ideas and spiritual methods, how to pray, how to contemplate, what to contemplate on, how to run a church. There's a lot of practical things because we are in Malkut, we are in the kingdom. So Binah is also in Malkut. And conveying ideas and methods is a very practical, methodical, logical, rational thing to do, and a natural thing to do. It's a natural thing to preach, preach, but a natural thing to teach. But also, it's a very good thing to set a good example because you might be doing something and a child comes up to you and says, "What are you doing?" And then you can explain what it is you're doing. And a lot of people come to you and say, "What are you doing?" Or "What can I do about more or less, what are you doing? And how are you getting it right?" If that can be said. Of meditation, and you can say, "Well, this is what I found to be useful," and they can take it away and run with it as far as they want. So, obviously this is a complex subject, and I'm not going to go into the theory of teaching, also a contentious subject, of course. Do you let people discover things for themselves? So you initiate someone into knowledge which they have to discover for themselves, or do you hold someone's hand, or do you direct them? Are you quite directive? Are you quite dogmatic? You've got to do it this way and no other way, and to what extent you have to be dogmatic about things. I think there is a place for dogma, actually, and a place for guru chila hierarchy. And there's also a place for self-realization through discovery methods, and you're introducing someone, giving them the tools to make the tools to help themselves. So there's a debate about all this, and I think perhaps much to be said is on both sides, really. But anyway, you are obliged to convey what you experienced and how you experienced it within the context of Gnostic theory and philosophy and the Gnostic categorization of the universe, and indeed Gnostic cosmology. Gnosticism is very much based on how things have come into be, how things have come to pass. What has got us in the situation whereby we will seek a method to experience gnosis. Why are we doing it? What's the point of it all? How did we get here? Are we in a mess? Are we? Is it possible to be redeemed from the mess we're in if we are in a mess? So often, a good teacher can present people with various questions, good questions that their students will answer, and when they come to answer these questions, they will benefit from the answers that they themselves discover. So you're asking the right questions, and the right questions may produce the right answers, and the wrong questions may produce the wrong answers, which also is a complex situation to be in, or you know. So that's what I mean about convey. And of course, we are above the abyss here. The three Sephirot, Keter, Binah, and Choma, are above the abyss. So you've got Keter as the first, Choma as the second, and Binah as the third. And these are the three supernal Sephirot, the supernal triad, which are very, very high up. So we're into kind of theoretical land here in a way. And yet, despite being very theoretical, they also have a very practical application. So Binah, Choma, and Keter are present within our universe, within the worlds of the demiurge. You see this theoretical database or theoretical knowledge coming into its own, really, because we have to work with what we've got, and what we've got is our own blood and bones and neuro connections and our own lifespan and our own physical health and life situation and economic situation, etc. So we've got this is what we're working within, So the supernal triad is not like some kind of like holy grail kind of Monty Python kind of thing over the hill and far away. It's going inward for a start, but it's also not an airy fairy kind of thing, which is just for like some kind of sort of robed magus to wander about with, or some kind of elitist magical order that meets in secret in some hidden grove, and they have all the answers and they sit there smugly on their asses, all seating around, mostly men, I have to say, sitting around, all tossing together, if you pardon the French, without much to contribute to society at all, if anything. Um, and like the Buddha, if you have a message to convey, then you should convey it. And if people have ears to hear you, they will listen to you. And if they don't, they won't. And it doesn't matter. It's no big deal if people say, "I don't know, no idea what you're rabbiting on about, mate." Uh, you're talking a load of rubbish. That's okay. You don't mind that. But some people might come to you and say, "Hey, that's really, really good, and I tried that method that you suggested, and wow, it's brilliant, really great." So, and I've changed my whole life, and I've become a reclusive, meditative, contemplative, transcendental person as a result of my connection, my association with you, which is great. Not only, and they might be better at it than you, they might take it further than you as well, which is also very good. Your students should outshine teachers for sure. And the other thing about conveying knowledge, it sort of goes back to this kind of general conveying of personal gnosis through the arts, is that sometimes you drop a stone into a pond, and you've got these ripples going out from the epicenter, and these ripples can have a very profound effect on people. So it's not even the stone or the pebble that you drop into the water; it's the ripple effect of doing so that can change people's lives or make them see things differently. However, I would say that is a very uncontrolled way of doing it. You never know how people are going to interpret what you teach them or what you convey through the arts. Of course, by definition, it's very much up to the individual how they interpret your gnosis and how they might apply it to their own lives. But when you teach Gnosticism, I suppose you're teaching a more sort of faculty-based academic, a sort of a kind of a consistent body of knowledge, and therefore, you're pointing people in a particular direction. So your knowledge is sort of pushing someone in a certain direction, whereas if it's just going to be the arts, you don't really care. People are going to be going in all directions. It's non-directive. So the arts are non-directive, in a sense, but formal teaching, as like Blavatsky did, or Spensky, or Gurdjieff, or Jesus, or Muhammad, or the Buddha. You are taking a corpus of methods, a corpus of knowledge, and you are sort of pushing people along a certain path, a certain way of looking at the world, which is good and bad. Just the same as the uncontrolled approach of the artist is also good and bad. Um, it's bad in the sense that some people may misinterpret what you convey, and might go completely nuts with it all. But it's also true that formal teaching can also makes people crazy. But I would suggest that those people are already crazy. Already. It's not your fault if you've got sort of an Anakin Jedi warrior who goes bad. It's not really the fault of the Order, the Jedi. Although perhaps in that Star Wars scenario, perhaps they should not have taught somebody who was older than a child and set in their ways and already having psychological issues, which the Jedi knowledge only amplified, and they became worse as people and got more power, but not unfortunately more wisdom. To know the difference between power and power. So but it's not. I don't really think it's particularly your fault if you get somebody who goes off the deep end and goes crazy, because they probably were going to go crazy anyway. It wasn't your art that drove them crazy, and it wasn't your teaching either. Everything is done in good faith. That the person having the information conveyed to them is going to not have particular issues of megalomania and psychopathy and sociopathy. You just have to take everybody on trust in a way, like you have to take your teacher on trust for that matter. Great and perfect love and perfect trust. But unfortunately, of course, this being the finite worlds of the demiurge, anything can happen and probably will. But as I said before, to convey is an affirmational word, I think, which is properly attributed to Binah, the great sea of information, the great sea of knowledge, is there to sort of scoop up and give to somebody in a bucket, which will encourage them to go to the great sea and scoop up more knowledge for themselves.